that were amassing forces to attack the Muslims. And that is when the army was sent out. And when they actually got there, there was no battle. The issue was resolved and the Prophet ﷺ returned. So this is one view. Now if you look at the three Imams, Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, all three of them believe that the purpose of jihad is what is known as izalat al-adawa, to remove adawa, to remove belligerence, to remove some threat that is looming out there and is in some way going to harm the Muslims, either their peoples or the subject peoples of the Muslims, who traditionally were known as the dhimmiyun. That was the purpose to go out. That is not the belief of Imam Shafi'i radiallahu anhu. But it's very interesting that of the four Imams, although there are two different opinions, the ruling madhabs in the history of Islam have been Hanafi and Maliki. These are the two madhabs that God has given sovereignty to in the earth. And in particular the Hanafi madhab, which has probably the most lenient views of non-Muslim peoples out of the four Imams, which is why the American RAND report, which is advising the US government in how they should deal with the Islamic threat, is suggesting that the United States promote the Hanafi madhab. So that's the official madhab of the State Department. So if you see any of the president praying with his hands under his navel, you'll understand why. So that is the idea, right? Is that this school of thought is part of our tradition. And one of the things that really strikes me about Islam is that we always talk about al-Islam salihun li kulli zaman wa makan. I mean, how many times have you heard that slogan? Al-Islam salihun li kulli zaman wa makan. Islam is possible in every time and place. Well, what does that mean? You see, the way most Muslims interpret it is that you have to rearrange the time and the place and make it in accord with a 7th century model. I mean, this is the idea that most Muslims have. I don't believe that. I actually believe that that means that Islam gives you the tools to actually be a Muslim in any time and any place, including living in non-Muslim lands. And that we have within our usul tradition, which is the juristic methodology of deriving rules and rulings, we have within that tradition all that we need, wherever we are, whether it's Great Britain or the United States or Canada or any other place on the planet. Rules that we have been given by our tradition, which includes revelation and it also includes intellect. Because Fakhruddin al-Razi says, Nurun ala nur means wahyun ala aqal. You can have revelation, but if you've got idiots that are interpreting that revelation, you have a very serious problem. And our history is filled with ignorant people attempting to interpret the Quran and the Sunnah and ending up leading themselves astray and leading other people astray. And one of the things that the Prophet ﷺ says about the end of time is that ignorant people will be taken as leaders. They will be asked questions of fiqh. And they will give their responses, and their responses are based on ignorance, and they end up going astray and leading others astray. That's a sign of the latter days in Sahih al-Bukhari. And that is because there are no longer ulama. There are no longer people that actually have this in-depth knowledge of the tradition, that are able to access the tradition. And this is one of the major problems confronting the Muslims today. And this is why one of the responses that is so common in the Muslim world today is reaction. There's no strategic planning. There's no actually thought about what does it mean if I do this, this, or this, you see. And we've got a bunch of idiots running out there and causing an immense amount of damage to Islam and to the Muslims. And another reason for that is because we've got all of these people out there that aren't really Muslims, but they're rather in a spiritual sense of the word. Because the Quran says, وَمَنْ أَسْلَمَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ تَحَرَّوْا رَشَدًا. those who enter into a state of submission are fervently seeking guidance. You see, Islam is an active state. It's not a passive state. You're not born a Muslim. That is a lie. You know, this idea that everybody's born a Muslim and you revert to Islam. There's no reversion to Islam. You convert to Islam. It's an active event. I mean, there's a spiritual reality of you're a Muslim at birth, just like every creature is in a state of Islam. Aslama man fis samawati wal ard. Everything in the heavens and the earth is in Islam. From that point of view, if you direct that verse, because that Allah uses a generalized substantive, if you look at that, then everybody's a Muslim. Well, that's not true. So how do you differentiate? There's an active Islam and there's a passive Islam. Every human being on this planet is in passive Islam. They're all in passive Islam. So the Muslim world that prides itself on being Muslim, they're as Muslim in many ways as the rest of the planet. Because they haven't actively entered into Islam. They haven't actively submitted to the will of God. They've simply taken a sociological identification. And this is tribal Islam, Banu Islam. And they begin to use this tribal identification vis-a-vis other tribes out there, Banu Yahud, and Banu Nasara, and Banu Ilhad, and Banu Humanism, Banu Sin, the tribe of China, whatever. And so this is how they look at it. So these people aren't looking at Britain or America as potential co-religionists, because that's simply not possible. They're kuffar.